HRN listeners. As we celebrate our 15th year, we are deepening our commitment to giving voice to the next generation of food systems storytellers, and we need your help. Our internship and fellowship programs help activate new possibilities for underrepresented and underestimated young people through experiential journalism, audio engineering, and production training. Through these unique programs, HRN helps food equity stewards build essential workforce readiness skills that expand their potential and foster economic mobility. Please consider supporting these critical programs. And with a minimum donation, you can be entered to win a dinner for two at an amazing restaurant in one of 8 cities and tickets to a concert at a great venue in one of those cities. We have incredible partners across the country who have donated, as they also share our passion for helping to educate the next generation of food systems storytellers. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. And make sure you donate before March 31st. Thank you.
Today's show is sponsored by Bob's Red Mill. With natural foods, they support organic, vegan, paleo, and gluten-free lifestyles. Learn more about their commitment to good food for all at bobsredmill.com/podcast.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network. We're a member-supported food radio network broadcasting over 35 weekly shows live from Bushwick, Brooklyn. Join our hosts as they lead you through the world of craft brewing, behind the scenes of the restaurant industry, inside the battle over school food, and beyond. Find us at heritageradionetwork.org.
All right. Thank you for tuning into the Heritage Radio Network. We took you through a range of emotions in our opening numbers today. There were ups, there were downs, there were highs, there were lows. Really excited to welcome Bob's Red Mill to the family. I'm sure you guys, even if the name is not ringing a bell, next time you're in the grocery store and you're picking up almost any type of pulse or grain, they are the kind of plastic bags with the picture of the kind of lovely looking old man, and are now the flagship sponsor of Heritage Radio Network, which is super awesome, and we're really excited to be working with them. David's holding up a giant picture of Bob. Anyway, so you hear a lot. You'll probably be hearing a little bit more from them through the show and through some of the other programs. You, of course, have tuned into the Farm Report. I am your host, Erin Fairbanks. I'm excited. Next week, my co-host, Charlie Comer, will be back, and we'll get to hear a little bit about her amazing tours. She's been away traveling. But today, we are also going to be taking a little bit of a trip. We are really excited to welcome to the studio Lorenzo Caponetti. Lorenzo, welcome.
Hello. I'm glad to be here. I'm very excited.
So you guys are probably picking up on an accent. Lorenzo's in town from Tuscania, Italy. It's about 50 miles outside of Rome. And he is working this evening with Chef Mike Anthony at Untitled, the restaurant Untitled at the Whitney, putting together an olive oil dinner. That's a little bit about of what we're going to talk about today. You guys, I have to implore you to check out the Casa Caponetti website, which is www.casacaponetti.com, because Lorenzo, you guys do so much stuff at your, there's cows, there's pigs, there's olive oil, there's Etruscan ruins, there's, vegetable farms, there's a restaurant, there's an internship program, there's a nonprofit. We're not going to have time to cover everything today. But I do think where I'd love to start is talking a little bit about what a special place, just geographically, your farm is, and a little bit about the kind of history of who shaped the land and how that's impacted kind of the work and the opportunities, but also the responsibilities that you guys are bringing to your operation today.
Well, that's a lot of.
I know, right? I give
you
like
a lot of stuff into a question.
I'm like notorious for asking the 8-question question. I'm like, take it away, Sam.
Well, anyway, Tuscania is that's the name of the town, and it will probably ring a bell in this country as Tuscany, which is actually true even if we're falling out of it today. But it's the same root of a name that brings us back to the Etruscan people. Etruscan people were a pre-Roman civilization. Is actually the civilization that gave the start to Rome. They were active anytime between 1100 and like 100 BC, just to locate them in time. And what they did was quite special because they were actually able to tame all of central Italy from a wild set of marshes and woods into one of the most sophisticated agricultural systems of all times. They had two main keys to achieve this goal. One was that they were very good sailors and they were good traders, and they had a lot of connection with the East and the Fertile Crescent, and that's where the technology was back then because they had been developing farming, like in the previous 2,000 years. And the other feature was that they were very good miners. And by mining, they were able to dig these tunnels, water tunnels. You have to imagine that our bedrock is very porous. It's kind of volcanic lava that has solidified as like a solid sponge. And if you're cutting through it, you can either condensate water and collect water that was fresh water, or you can actually drain what's on top. And the top of it, being it volcanic, our region is full with former lakes or former basins that are closed basins. And along shore, the Etruscan were able to drain those marshes and bring into cultivation muck that was some of the most fertile soil ever.
I feel like it's like I really want to just like stop here and kind of imagine, arriving onto this piece of property 2,700 years ago, thinking about like the tools, like technology, the workforce that you have, and looking at a marsh and being like, you know what, this is where we want to set it up. And we're going to do that by, carving out, tunnels in incredibly hard, like.
Well, I'm gonna tell you a story that is not related to my farm, but it's definitely related to what the Etruscan were able to achieve. South of Rome, there is an area of former volcanoes. And in there we got two basins, two craters. One is Lake Albano, one is former Lake Aricia. The Aricia basin is very flat. The Albano crater has very steep walls. Now, about 600 years before Christ, they were able to dig a tunnel that is almost 1 mile long that crosses under the mountain and connects the two.
That's just amazing.
So they were able to use the lake, which is still there. They regulate the level, and they were able to use that as a capacitor. The whole volcano was a capacitor for water. And the basin that was downstream, the Aricia crater, which is very shallow, they drained that out, and they had muck, and they had water to irrigate from the lake and the volcano. And this was like 600 years before Christ.
I'm feeling like such a slacker right now.
But
I've never dug anything. I've like barely dug a hole.
But that comes to what you were saying. What responsibility do we have? I mean, today, if we look at that place in time and in history and in geography that our civilization is at, we think like we're the badass. We think like we're doing the right thing. I mean, I challenge you to take a pick and a volcano and a lake and do those type of things. So these are the challenges that we're facing basically every day when we set out to farm. The Etruscan people were the ones who introduced the plow with the iron shape in order to put in cultivation all the clay soils that are closer to the river and closer to the sea. They were able to bring in concept like private property of land, writing, a structured society. And a structured society means that they were very good at farming, because you cannot have a structured society unless those who are farming are able to create a surplus. If everybody is always only looking for food, there's never a differentiation in society. They were very good traders. They were very good lobbyists, in a sense, you know. And there's a lot of people that say, there are three major civilizations of the late antiquity, like the Romans and the Greek and the Etruscans. And a lot of people look at the Greek like the ones who invented democracy, and so they should be regarded as the good ones, or the Romans are the ones who expanded the empire. I kind of relate a lot more to the Etruscans than the Greek, because yes, the Greek, they invented democracy, but the Etruscan, they invented the lobbying system. And democracy is not that healthy today. Well, the lobbying system seems to be very strong.
Oh, brother. Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's like not something that we often talk about on the program is the way that agriculture and culture are so intertwined historically. And then kind of fast forwarding today, I think what you see a lot in people's real desire to reconnect with their food supply, to reconnect with the land, is like a little bit of this kind of like yearning for that connection to something real, to like being able to put your hands into something. And I would say, like, for you, there must be something a little strange about, like, what are you going to do on the farm that someone 2,700 years from now is going to, be able to benefit from? It's a very big picture thinking in the landscape of having to also run a business day to day.
But now here we're kind of jumping from in time. But if we put ourselves in the mindset of working for a future, the only thing that we should do now is planting trees. Even if we all have a big problem today, which is like 400 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. And even if we potentially will wake up tomorrow into a world that is just running on renewables, we still will need to take some of those CO2 out of the atmosphere. And one of the best and fastest ways of doing that is building permanent biomass. And we can build that permanent biomass by planting trees, or we can build up biomass in the soil by increasing the organic matter into the soil. And that's just the way to go. And it's even a way that is going to feed us with great food. So when I'm looking at that, of course, we want to be energy conscious. We want to, save water when we flush the toilet and whatever. But there is a lot more that we can do, and there's a lot more that we can do in farming. That's basically how I came up. I started the farm 22 years ago, almost by chance. I didn't plan to become a farmer. Life is sometimes just unexpected, and that's why we like it. Yeah. But we started off by breeding horses, and we found the olive trees on the farm. And then as we went, we started realizing there were a number of things that weren't functioning. And at the same time, the farm was way too big for me to manage, so I had to simply discard parts of it because I wasn't able to keep up with everything. And that was good, because most of the time with nature, the less you do and the better it is. And so I started realizing that all of those places that I had discarded could actually bring me something. So my mindset is never to try and reach for one set goal that I want to reach like 100%. Is always trying to understand what can I do with what I have and make the most of it, and how can I enrich it by adding different features. So we started with the horses. We had to add the cattle because the horses are so poor graziers. They just like to trample over the grass versus eating. The cattle are a lot more pragmatic and down to earth, and they have two completely different ways of grazing. Then we ended up having the vegetable garden for us, and with the vegetable garden came the first pig, because of course the garden is giving us so much when we don't need it. And now 20 years later, we have a whole system that is basically all integrated, in which the livestock and the pigs are integrated with the with the olive oil making. I was telling you before that we are feeding our cattle the clippings from pruning the trees. This is something that 20 years ago, when I started the mainstream, is you take them out the field and you burn it.
The tripping. Well,
the trimmings. The trimmings. Then we started mulching, and we started mulching off-site. Then we started mulching on-site because we didn't want to do any schlepping, and then we were able to yet open up one more biological cycle with the cows eating those right on-site and giving us manure. But at the same time, we shifted more and more toward a more natural way even of managing the trees. Our pruning is reduced to a minimum. The trees are very natural. This brings to the fact that we have very high-yielding plants that are kind of yielding. The yield is kind of scattered, kind of randomly from year to year. We have 500 trees, and every year we never harvest more than 200 of those. But that's because we are shooting for maybe 80% of the crop that is there, because the other 20%, the pigs will eat it.
Okay. So I'm like wondering, it's 20 years ago, you're on the property, you're raising horses. You essentially say you like kind of discover the olive trees. And how do you go from like, oh, there's a bunch of olive trees to producing olive oil? Like, how do you kind of harness what had been, because I'm assuming the trees had been like potentially like untended for some time. So how do you like...
Definitely. There was a huge work. Again, this was a whole process of growth for myself. I don't have a background in farming. I don't have a degree in farming. I had no clue of what I was doing. So the first thing you do, you kind of steer toward elderlies that have been doing that because you think they know what they're doing. A lot of them are great. I learn a lot, but as a matter of fact, we need to understand that we're in a place in history in which the elderlies have been practicing for the last 2 generations a system that is new. The elderlies that have been around in the last 50 years, they've been dealing with tractors and chemicals that simply weren't there before, and it's only now that we're starting to see the aftermath. And there is something that simply doesn't add up. So I started by doing a lot of effort, putting in a lot of work in order to try and prune and try and understand what to do and what not. And I started producing the olive oil, and it was oil, you know. But then I had an epiphany, and the epiphany was when I was traveling to this country the first time. This was 2003, 2004. By twist of fate, I found myself in Kansas. And then from there,
what
exactly? And I found myself in Kansas just coming out of Uzbekistan, and this is another story that we'll tell another time. But anyway, and then by another twist of fate, I found myself at the Culinary Institute of America, and I started relating to people that were professionals into the business, and then it was. In a very short period of time, I ended up relating to people like Mike Anthony and people like Dan Barber and people that are, those are the high ups. Those are people that are knowing what they're doing, And the epiphany was that I never had given that much credit to my olive oil because, my trees are 500 trees over a gazillion trees that are in Italy, and of course I've been trying to do my best, but especially back then I didn't know a shit about it. And but the epiphany was that, hey, I'm dealing with something that was left on my land by somebody that was before me, and I don't have to do anything but harvest this thing. And yet with this I can produce something that is, one of the best produced in the world. That's kind of cool, So let's go back, and then what I did, starting from there, was that I had this relationship with the Culinary Institute of America, and they kept inviting me, back every year, and for about almost 10 years, whatever, I made the point of making the one lecture better and better and better every year,
right?
And and that brought me back on books on the olive tree cultivation, the olive tree production. I was lucky enough to be admitted into a very short course to become a qualified professional miller, for running a pressing facility.
Okay.
And in passing of time, I seek for different information. But again, one thing is the information on the technicalities about how to produce the olive oil, and one thing is be able to insert all of that knowledge and connect all of that knowledge with all the bigger picture. Like again, who was here before, who will be here next.
Right.
I did refer to Uzbekistan because that's a country that I've been traveling to for many years as an archaeologist. And I had some friends in Samarkand, which is one of the old cities of the old Silk Road. And Samarkand happens to be on the same latitude as San Francisco. But that's exactly 12 time zones apart. So it's like on the two opposite ends of our hemisphere. And I suddenly kind of had this image that I was kind of stuck in between those two cities. And, and this is kind of a horizontal line. And the vertical line is the line of time. So I was suddenly almost overwhelmed because I started asking myself, how is what I'm doing affecting somebody that is in Samarkand, or relating to somebody that is in the Bay Area, or again relating to somebody that will be here in 2,700 years from now? It was kind of scary.
So I feel like a little bit what I'm hearing with regards to the oil, and I think this is true often in food in particular, there's a little bit of getting out of the way of the product, I think when you're new to I felt like for myself as when I was new to the kitchen, I thought to make delicious food, I had to put a lot of myself, there just needs lots of stuff, right? Special techniques and certain things. But I feel like as you kind of learn more, ultimately one of the weird outcomes is you end up doing less. You get, you're kind of just getting out of the way of the process and letting the thing kind of speak for itself and looking for ways to reinforce its natural tendencies versus exerting your will onto it.
Well, this is particularly true about olive oil making. And there's a very good reason, or at least something that I feel like is a good reason. And the reason is that of all fat matters, the olive oil, the extra virgin olive oil, is the only one that is coming out of the flesh of the fruit and not the seed. This makes it possible for us to get it only through basically a squeezing. That's what we call a mild technology, which is basically a squeezing and then a separation between the different, water and pits and pit shards and all that. But my point is that this is a process of making the olive oil that doesn't involve any heat nor fermentation, which in turn implies that the enzymes that were into the olive when the olive was on the tree, they are still alive today into the little can that I have. That I did bring for you.
You brought me some? He was like, when we were emailing, he's like, can I bring you anything from Italy? And I'm like, obviously some olive oil. And it's interesting too. I will say, guys, you want to, and I think maybe we'll talk about this a little bit more in the second half of the show, is that you guys only sell direct from the farm. So I'm going to hold that point. I'm going to let you finish.
But the fact that these enzymes don't get killed, it means that all that we are tasting into the olive oil, which is basically then related to the healthy properties and the nutritional values, everything that is into the oil is made by those enzymes. And there's kind of no way of getting back. Working with an enzyme is only a matter of preempting something. You either want those enzymes to be working, and once you spark them, then they go, or you don't want them to go and then you want to work preemptively. And so this is why I say that olive oil making is a lot more difficult than wine making. I know that a lot of people will hate me for saying this, and I'm here to stand up, for that. But what I say, maybe it's not more difficult, but the wine making is a nod to the ability of man, while the olive oil making is a nod to the trees and and to nature and to the least intervention that we can do, which doesn't mean that we don't want to do anything. There are, of course, a number of things, a number of key moments in which we do want to make choices, but the bulk of those choices are kind of again preempting something. Yeah. Well,
let's take a moment here. We'll take a quick break to hear from our sponsor. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about what some of those intervention points are. So hang tight, guys. You're of course listening to the Heritage Radio Network. This is the Farm Report, and we will be right back.
Bob's Red Mill has been milling whole grains since 1978. When you mill whole grains, you get all three parts of the seed. You get the bran, the germ, and the endosperm. The germ is only about 2.5% of the kernel. It's actually the sprouting section of the seed, what's going to grow into a plant. It's usually separated during milling process because it contains most of the fat and therefore has a shorter shelf life. So what you want to do once you buy whole grain flour is keep it kind of wrapped so that oxygen can't get to it so it doesn't go rancid. But the good news about having that fat is that it has a lot of flavor. If you want, you can actually buy the wheat germ, for instance, and add it back to flours. But if you buy Bob's Red Mill product, it already has the germ in it, so you don't have to. Learn more at bobsredmill.com/podcast.
Well, there were 3 babies born, one of them couldn't see. Well, there were 3 babies born, one of them couldn't see. Well, it's just 1 out of 3, I wish that baby it was me. There were 3 babies born, boy, and one of them couldn't see.
Oh man, it is a veritable tour de force of emotions here. Thank you, David. We are back. You, of course, are listening to the Farm Report. We are in studio with Lorenzo Caponetti of Casa Caponetti, an amazing olive oil producer, amongst many other things. Before the break, we were talking a little bit about the process of producing olive oil, and you threw down. You said you think olive oil making is potentially more challenging than winemaking. And you were talking about intervention points. And so I want to give folks like an example or two of moments in the season, moments in the production that are kind of those critical decision-making points where you maybe change something you're doing or decide to pull from that tree or not pull from that tree. I mean, I don't really know. Like, what can you give us like some examples of like those moments?
Well, the first decision is to decide when to start the harvest. Of course, like in basically any other thing in farming, as any type of fruit, the olives are creating some compounds as they ripen, and some of those compounds is something that we want. But at the same time, there is a huge content in antioxidant into the olive, and those antioxidants are going to decrease with the maturing, with the ripening of the olive. The antioxidant are something that the tree is producing in order to protect the olive, and there's no meaning in protecting something that is ready to go.
Right.
So those antioxidants are going down. So we basically want to shoot for the optimum moment, and the optimum moment is when the bulk of the olives are turning from green to red, and of course some of them will be black and some of them will still be green. But we want the olives to be green because the green is chlorophylls, and with the chlorophylls there's other type of antioxidant like squalene and other compounds that we want, and at the same time we also want some fruitiness and something like that. This is also related to the one main pest that we have, that is basically a specific fruit fly, specific of the olive, which will lay the eggs into the olive and can potentially destroy the whole product. And there are no real, even if today there are some tools, even in organic farming, none of them is actually doing much. The best is anticipate the harvest and try to do our best in doing that. Then another one, as soon as we harvest the olives, it's like a ticking bomb because we have enzymes that are starting to...
They're not getting any better once they come off the tree.
Exactly. So we are making a point in crushing the olives as soon as possible. It is a standard for us that we crush the same night of the day's harvest. And so acting very fast in that regard is critical. Once we get into the pressing facility, we want to decide what type of technology are we going to use it. Are we going to use? We are still today using the stones to grind the olives. And again, there are a number of people around there that are very critical of this because they say the main criticism to this is that the olives, they get exposed to oxygen, so they will oxidate. But as a matter of fact, oxygen during the crushing is something that we want because there is one enzyme that we want to start working that is actually giving the start to a whole downfall of chemical reaction, which are creating all the terpenes. So all anything that we can smell through the nose and through the palate that is volatile is there thanks to that enzyme that is called chromatin. And it's called chromatin because it gets released in the minute, the olive get crushed. But at the same time, you don't want to kill that enzyme, and killing that enzyme is easy if you overheat even instantaneously the olive. But if you figure that you want to crush at the same time the flesh and the pits, the stones that with their heavy mass are the only ones that are able to achieve that goal by turning gently.
Right.
And so that is. Then immediately after that, we want to keep the paste, keep the mashed olives as away as possible from oxygen at that point. So we want to seal everything. And of course, we want to control temperature. Everybody is going crazy in this country for cold pressed.
Right.
And anytime, and by law, anything that has the label virgin extra, the extra means that no temperature has exceeded like 30 degrees Celsius during the making.
Okay.
And the temperature is very important, again, because if you go above 30 Celsius, you will kill some enzymes.
Right.
At the same time, if you go below 27 Celsius, the oil simply wouldn't come out. Anybody who has tried washing a pan with cold water knows what I'm talking about, So
I like that example.
But my point is that more often than not, our harvest season is like in late October, early November, sometimes early December. More likely than not, the temperature outside will be much colder than 27 Celsius. I mean, 27 Celsius is whatever, 80s Fahrenheit. So it's kind of warm. And so more likely than not, we had to actually warm up the paste to that degree. So are we still calling this cold?
Right.
And so this is to say, so these are all type of decision making that we want to make as we are producing the olive oil.
So I want to ask for thinking about when so you mentioned what the olives look like on the tree, helping you determine when you're going to harvest, through the kind of crushing and pressing process, really kind of controlling time, controlling for temperature, to activate or deactivate enzymes to create kind of the flavor profile you're ideally looking to achieve. How are you? Is there a technical way of measuring those things? Or is it are you just literally looking at the tree and you're now is the time? Or is there some kind of special instrument? Or as you're going into the kind of crush and press process, are you okay, we put some kind of special, thermometer in there that gives you what are the kind of technical interventions, if there are any, or is it just kind of look and feel of the producer making those choices?
For me, is a matter of just look and feel.
I thought you were going to say that, which is interesting because then it ties the oil to you in a very intimate way. Somebody else could come on, same trees, same property, same equipment, and their oils,
it's going to be different.
Different, yeah.
Yes, as much as I said that all of the credit is on my trees, there is something that I'm doing, and yes. So the keys are in again trying to keep the temperature under control even after you have just harvested the olives.
Right.
I mean, this is something that is coming up. I mean, with this climate change weird thing, sometimes we find ourselves harvesting olives in short sleeves, which is not the way it's supposed to be.
Right.
Because again, those enzymes are in there. At that point, you want to keep the olives as cool as possible. And there are a lot of people that are with larger operation that are collecting the olives, the harvested olives, into big bins. Mm-hmm. We're using those small bushels.
Right.
But even in those, sometimes if you're on a sunny day,
it gets hot.
Yeah. So I this is something that I do, that I take care of, maybe just passing the olives from one bushel to the next. That would be enough air to get them cooled down, because as soon as they start, again, warming up, then those microbes
things to activate because they're alive.
Absolutely.
And I feel like there's a certain, like, I feel like I've had the benefit of being exposed to the idea of fresh olive oil and, kind of olive oil being like a seasonal thing. When I was working for Zingerman's, they, of course, imported oils from all over the world. And it was always very exciting during harvest season when you would get the shipment of that year's season, and then you could taste it, and you can taste 2013 across a bunch of different regions in the world, or the same oil you could taste last year and this year's production, and as a consumer, I feel like that's not necessarily we've been taught. You said cold press, people go out there tell me what to buy, tell me how do I look for it, and I think there's something to the American way of using olive oil, where it's how do you even actually use it? How many oils should I be having at home? Do I have a collection to use for different? How do you kind of think about it?
Well, that goes. There's two ways of looking at this. One way is what I call the hedonistic part. Okay. That is purely the taste in regard to how it feels in your mouth.
Right.
And of course, I will always encourage people to have a selection of olive oils in their home versus only one. But at the same time, there's another way of looking at this, and we want to look at the olive oil, even the only one olive oil that you have on your counter, I have mine, and you want to look at it as a seasonal product. Being it a juice that is coming out of the flesh of the fruit, is still fresh and is still alive. And being it alive, it changes through the time.
Right.
So what we do, we specialize in freshest possible olive oil. So we harvest one day, we press that same night, the next day is in the mill. We don't filter it because filtering is good in the long run, but it's bad in the short run.
Right.
And the threshold between short and long is 9 to 10 months.
Right.
So I like to trade off something in the last 2 months of the year, but I want to benefit, for the first part. But this is to say that again, the olive oil will keep changing no matter what we do, or maybe even according to what we do. We are packing in tin. And not glass. And the tin is better for the oil because it's completely dark. And it's even more oxygen tight than glass. And we want to keep the oxygen out. And again, a lot of people look at us like we're doofuses because they say that, tin is cheap.
Right.
I don't care, so much the better.
Right.
I'm selling the olive oil. I'm not selling the container, and it's even sturdier and lightweight for shipping. So there are a number of reasons. But the tin, this is to say that even the container that the oil is in, it impacts the quality of what comes to your table. And especially in this country in which the bulk of the oil consumed is imported from abroad. I remember meeting with this guy at some point in this country years ago, and he was very happy because he had bought a share of an olive yard in Umbria, and he had his own oil shipped over every year. And we were kind of in March, and I said, okay, let me taste it. And he said, it's still on the cruise ship, it's still coming over. And that oil was paid in November.
Right.
And the guy 5 months later, the guy still didn't have it.
Right.
So there is the whole process of distribution and getting it to your table and all that is impacting the quality of what you're getting. Not to speak about the fact that, of course, this goes back to other matter, but the olive oils that we're doing are single olive, so 100% pure of one variety. We have two different varieties, but we press them separately. The bulk of what you're buying is blends.
Right.
So
it's less of an expression of, one of the things I thought was so interesting is that you bottle, the labels will indicate what group of trees that oil came from, I was like, well, that's some traceability because you have to keep in mind, folks, that Lorenzo's entire farm is 125 acres, so we're not talking about a vast array, but the nuances between trees in kind of lot A and trees in lot B,
But there's a lot of people that say, hey, can you really tell the difference from those trees and those trees? And I said, it's like I bring up the matter of walking through a town. Mm-hmm. Can you tell the difference from one block to the next?
Yes.
You probably can't. But if you keep walking long enough, you'll find yourself in Bushwick.
Yeah, right? Like, draw the line. Well, we're just about out of time. I know that you have the dinner coming up at Untitled tonight, and it's an olive oil dinner. And I want to, with the couple of minutes that we have left, talk a little bit about, how you and Mike are working together and thinking about the menu and what are the applications that you're excited to be tasting and sharing with folks for the dinner this evening?
Well, there are many of them. One is going to be a citrus salad with fennel in it, which is something that I like a lot because our area is full with wild fennel, and the wild fennel is very smelly, and so I can taste that into the olive oil a lot, so that is good. Of course, there will be an olive oil cake, which is also great, and there's going to be the risotto. There's going to be a few things that are all very enticing.
Right.
And I brought two different olive oils. One is the Canino, one is the Frantoio that we make out of the two different varieties of olives that we have on the farm. And there's going to be a 5-course dinner, and before each of the courses are gonna hold a little spiel, a little conversation. I had 4 titles for this 4 conversation. One is private property, because I will relate to the Etruscans and the concept of private property of land. One is unplugged, because this is about the technicalities of making the olive oil, and this is something that you only have so much control of, so it's like playing unplugged. One is going to be holding ground with a little help from my friends, and this will be how the cattle and the pigs, they actually play a role into the olive oil making. And then the last one is called Right Here on the Other Side. And this relates to a text from a song by the Pearl Jam, where he's talking, and it's a love song, and he says, hey, I need you. I just want you to be on my side and breath with me and hold me until I die and meet you on the other side. And I like to read that text as if I'm talking to an olive tree. And we're breathing together because what I breath is something that he has produced, and I need him to feed me. And then, but also the other side, if I'm talking to an olive tree, the other side is already here.
Right.
The olive tree is something that was left by somebody that was here before me. And when I go, I will leave those trees and potentially more trees to the ones that will be here.
Oh, man. Well, there are some very lucky diners who are going to be enjoying quite a show tonight. Lorenzo, thank you so much. If folks want to find out more about your operation, it's, again, www.casacaponetti.com, and folks can come and stay with you.
Absolutely. We have the bed and breakfast that is open all the time. We do cooking courses. We do daily tours. The ruins are always open for free for anybody who wants to come. Yes, we're always open to anybody.
And can folks get the oil? Is that an option for individuals? I don't want to break any hearts right now. But I want to clarify so folks.
No. We sell mainly to private people. Mm-hmm. We register to the FDA, so we are legal in shipping the olive oil. The way it works, we have an email mailing list that you want to subscribe to, and we are sending an olive oil alert out maybe 1 month before the harvest starts.
Right.
And then there's basically I want to say, a race,
right,
in getting your order, and I think it's a great way of doing business. I kind of almost know personally all of my customers. The bulk of them are recurring customers. The bulk of them have come to the farm or potentially will come to the farm, or I met them in my travels. And this is to say that, what happened is you place your order and we put your order on hold until we know how much we have.
Right.
And if we don't have enough, then we'll cut your order a bit in order that everybody can get their share. Some. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. And again, that's a great way of doing business. We of course are able to make a little more profit like this, but we're also making more connections and all that. And the only trade-off is that people will have to buy a minimum order of 2.5 liters or 5 liters. That's the only two sizes that we are selling. But each order comes in 10 little cans. So you're gonna get like 10 500 milliliters, and this comes right before Thanksgiving. So a lot of people buy and take and keep some for them and keep and use the rest for gifts.
For gifts. What is that like? What a special story. Lorenzo, I wish we had more time, but we don't. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. This place is awesome. The whole operation is awesome. I'm very proud and happy of being part of this community. Keep going and, keep it on, and we're going to change the world.
All right.
One radio show at a time.
One radio show at a time, one olive tree at a time. Well, please, if you're out there listening, if you believe in the work of Heritage Radio Network, we are a 501c3 nonprofit. We do depend entirely on the support of our underwriters like Bob's Red Mill that you learned a little bit more about on the show today, but also listeners like you who throw us a couple of bucks. We've still got some great t-shirts and other gifts. You can learn more and check out the swag by visiting www.heritageradionetwork.org. Also, if you listen via iTunes or Stitcher, take a moment and review the show. We'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback. It also helps other people find the program. Really appreciate you tuning in. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content and to hear about exclusive events, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at heritage_radio. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be a part of the food world's most innovative community? Rate the shows you like, tell your friends, and please join our community by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. Thanks for listening.